Welcome to the Women in Transport podcast. I'm your host, Shireen Ali Khan, and this is season 2, where we are covering everything intersectionality. We're looking at the layers that make us who we are. We're looking at privilege, looking at oppression, and really what makes us human. Today's episode, we are joined by colleagues from Brightly, who are Women in Transport corporate partners, and also with a colleague from the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham. So Hannah, I will come to you first to give us an introduction, and then Donna to you as well.
Thanks, Shireen. Really happy to be here on the podcast today. I am the General Manager and Country Lead for the UK for Brightly. And Brightly is a software company. We provide asset management solutions to local authorities mainly, and some of our customers are county, metropolitan, city level councils, as well as national highways use our software to maintain the highway. So we work a lot with people who work in transport. We ourselves are a software house, but we are supporting sort of like the maintenance and the operations of our highways, our pavements, our trees, our benches, you name it. We have it managed within our software. Software is called Confirm, which some people might know us by as well. We work closely with Hammersmith and Fulham, and Donna today, I asked if she'd attend this with us because we work very closely together from a perspective of women in transport as well. And we've been a corporate sponsor for Women in Transport for the last year, and that's been really good. We just had an event recently where Women in Transport came and supported and gave a presentation on networking for our customers, which they all found, we got great feedback and found really helpful. And all of the events and the content that Women in Transport provide I've just found so useful over the years. So really happy to be working with Women in Transport.
Thank you, Hannah. And tell me, how long have you been a member of Women in Transport yourself?
I think it's 3 years now. Yes, I was a single member for a couple of years, and then we became corporate members just last year.
Amazing.
So, yeah. And actually, one of the good things that I've been able to do with that is offer the membership to our clients as well, especially when in an environment in local authorities where money's tight, they're perhaps not able to be a member of more than one thing. And so we actually are funding their membership through our corporate membership, which makes me really happy.
Oh, wow. I love that. What a great way to share that kind of intellectual property and that network and that group of people. Donna, introduce yourself. Tell us about you and what you're doing. I'd love to hear more.
Hi, thanks for having me. So Donna Kelly from Hammersmith and Fulham Council. We're in Transport member for about 6 months now, thanks to Brightly. And yeah, as Hannah mentioned, we've known each other for a long time. Hammersmith and Fulham have been using Confirm, I think, since 2003. And it's a great asset management tool that I use all day, every day. And it's really key to have access to your data so you know what inventory you've got out. In my role, I maintain the highway infrastructure, so roads, pavements, street furniture. And you're nothing without knowing exactly what you've got. So, just even like a list of the roads, the highway network that you have, that's all sits in Confirm for us. Hannah and I obviously we work together through Confirm, but on the other side, we also deal with like women's issues, women in highways. So I chair a group called LoWEG, which is the London Women in Engineering Group. Hannah is one of our members, and I will describe more about LoWEG later.
Yeah, you will. And I'm really looking forward to hearing exactly where that group came from and some of the stuff that you do. And so 2003 is when you started using this software. And I feel like you and Hannah have known each other throughout that whole time. So how long have you both known each other for?
Well, I've worked for the company for 16 years. So it's probably about that, I would say. It's around about that sort of time
What
frame.
a great legacy. And I bet you've got lots of stories to tell as well. So let's jump into the theme of today's episode. So we're really looking at how we can navigate male-dominated industries of highways, for example, and of software, and really tips for setting up women's groups and supporting women in the industry, and actually understanding like the value of networks, because I certainly know from my experience, I didn't know I needed a network until I came across it. And actually how sad, because not everyone gets to come across a really good network. And how can we support people in you don't know what you don't know, so how can we really kind of look after them? So with that, tell me, what was your first experience of when you felt excluded or prejudiced against because you are a woman? Hannah, would you like to go first?
Yes, and I was thinking about this just the other day, that my first experience was when I was doing my business A level. And so I would have been, 17, I think, is that when you're doing A levels? And we went on a factory tour visit, and I was asking all the questions. I was the only girl in the group. And I remember the guy who was giving the tour wouldn't look at me when he gave the answers. He would look at my male students, other students in the group. And I just remember being so confused by that whole piece and not understanding why he wasn't looking at me when I was asking the questions. Or he'd then direct questions at everyone other than me. So I went back after that trip and spoke to my female business studies tutor. And she just gave a kind of a shrug, a kind of a wry smile, and almost just sort of said, that's the way of the world. And I was just still quite naive, probably, inexperienced, to kind of going out and being in the world. So I couldn't understand why I was being treated differently, and the fact that it had actually come down to the fact that I was a girl. So that was kind of disappointing in that respect.
Absolutely. How awful. And you say you're about 17. Those are really, formative experiences of telling us how the world works, how people work, how behaviors are, who our allies are, who our friends are. And I just think it's almost that conditioning of this is how it is, where then you don't speak up, you don't say anything because you think that's how people should be. And I should be seen as inferior because of XYZ. And almost gaslighting from your lecturer, from your teacher to say, well, that's kind of how it is, not a big deal, just get on with it. Donna, tell me about your experiences and kind of where it all kind of, kicked off for you to say this isn't quite right.
So I've been with Hammersmith and Fulham since I was 19, which is about 22 years now. And it was within my first 2 years there. I was either 19 or 20. And a senior engineer said to me that I looked like a naughty schoolgirl. I had my glasses on, I had my hair in a braid, and I didn't say anything to him. I just thought, that's not okay. But I went and told my manager, and I was like, look, this has happened. It's made me feel quite uncomfortable. And luckily he spoke to the engineer and said, don't be such a pervert. She's half your age. I never got an apology or anything like that, but it was nice to have an ally, like you say, in my manager to go and do that. But looking back, I just wish that I'd had the language or like the confidence, the courage to say to him, that's a really gross thing to say. He was the same age as my dad. But it stuck with me. And even now, 22 years later, I don't have my hair in plaits at work. It's just sort of stuck with me. And like Hannah's story, things that happen to you when you're that kind of age, quite early on in your career, whether you mean to or not, it will stay with you forever. And it is really sad.
Yeah, and just to that point, I think people underestimate the impact that they have on other people. And so you might not be self-aware of yourself, but actually we all leave some form of impact. So those inappropriate comments, the kind of the humor that goes with it to say, oh, she's half your age, but actually that we know that's inappropriate, and the impact of that is that you haven't been able to wear your hair a certain way. And we do often blame women, like, what was she wearing? It's all those conversations, and you think, actually, at what point does that actually stop? And how sad that these examples took place and both of you called it out to somebody, and then Donna, you've just said, now I wish I had the guts to actually say it to that person, and maybe Hannah, you might feel in that way as well, to call it out, but actually the guilt then comes back onto you, which is, I wish I could have, but we all three of know that shouldn't happen in the first place. So how horrible. So those were examples of a time gone. Let's kind of fast forward to more recent experiences. Have you had any experiences recently where things haven't sat quite rightfully for you?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. And there's still examples of it that I have really frequently, but one that really stands out was one that was a couple of years ago. And given the fact that I have been working, for 20 years now since that happened, even 2 years ago, I still didn't have the language or the confidence to really speak up in the moment. But I'll give you the example. As Brightly, we were pitching to one of our clients an offering that we had around carbon reporting and how we could help the councils to measure their carbon footprint. And so I was talking to quite a senior person at a council about doing this, And the guy said, oh, carbon reporting, it's a bit like taking a woman's bra off for the first time. It's really, yeah, it's really tricky and difficult, and you fumble around to begin with, but then it gets easier over time. And in the moment, I think I was shocked, really, because it's not like, I mean, this is quite, I feel like it's quite an extreme example. We don't really bring women's underwear, into a conversation at work. You're not expecting it. So I didn't say anything at the time. But I then immediately, luckily now, as an adult and working for a long time, I have my network, and I've got this Teams chat of women that I can go to in Brightly. So I was immediately on there saying, this is what's just happened. What should I have said? And I had a range of things coming back. But one example was, well, use the analogy of tying your shoelaces for the first time, because you have to learn how to tie your shoelaces, and it's a skill that you kind of like acquire from a young age. And so I was like, perfect. So I emailed the guy back and said, look, the bra analogy made me feel uncomfortable. Next time, why don't you use the analogy of tying your shoelaces? The guy came back and was apologetic and really said, oh, I'm so sorry. I knew immediately that it was the wrong thing to say. And I do think that he's probably used that analogy before in the depot, which is probably in front of loads of guys, and they've all thought it was really funny, and he got a good response from saying that. But the saddest thing about the whole thing was that I then subsequently emailed him 2-3 times afterwards to continue the conversation, and he never responded. So by calling him out, even though I'm really pleased that I did, it was the right thing to do, and I felt for me, perhaps I should have had it on the tip of my tongue in the moment, but I'm glad I called it out. But I still feel sad that it then completely stopped that professional conversation I was having with an individual. It's just, so mixed emotions there.
It's horrible, isn't it? Because, we tell people to call things out, and there's appropriate ways of calling things out. And, some of the advice is around doing it in private. And, there are times where you can do it in the moment, but there are times you can do it privately. And it seems like you did all the things to kind of save that person's ego. But then actually at the end of it, it's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, because then that person hasn't felt, for whatever reason, they wanted to continue that conversation. And I think it was in the game of building relationships, which arguably we all are, but it feels like you did it in the right way. You actually went back and got some other language for him to use, and you made like a real teachable moment. You did it nicely, kind of in confidence, but still that person felt, oh, I'm kind of done here. So how horrible. And that sexualized language as well, which is shocking. So of course in the moment you weren't able to say anything. It absolutely is shocking. Donna, let me come to you. What examples can you give us?
So a few years ago, I heard from a colleague that myself and another female manager had been referred to as a pair of nagging housewives by a very senior male officer. I was annoyed, but one of my first reactions was, oh, so you called it out, didn't you? And no, the colleague didn't, which I think infuriates me even more, because even thinking about it now, I'm getting myself wound up, because he took the time to tell us that this comment had been made, but he didn't realize that actually reflected quite poorly on him because he hadn't intervened. And it's like you say there, like the use of language, like two male officers would never be referred to as a pair of nagging housewives. It's that microaggression, and it's definitely around like the choice of language. It's like, well, if somebody is chasing you for something, maybe don't don't make it so that they have to chase you. But even now, I mean, if I'd been in the space, I would have called it out. I'm quite confident that I would have. But the fact that we hid it like second hand, I didn't feel like I could then raise it with the officer. So yeah, that has stuck with me, and that was only a few years ago. So unfortunately, these things still happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, kind of brings the whole kind of domesticity into it. And then it's almost like women are placed in a sexual role or in a domestic role. And none of that is workplace. It's inappropriate at any level, but none of it is based on you being annoying at work, like actually asking them to get their job done. Like that could have been a criticism to offer and not a nagging housewife. I find like the kind of derogatory tones with it, and certainly around the sexualized comments as well, it really kind of puts down anything that we're trying to achieve. So how awful in all those senses. And you're quite right, the colleague then to tell you is like, that's not actually that helpful. Focusing on the positives, and I know that you've both been working really hard on supporting women and creating networks around allyship. I'd really love to learn more, and I'd really love our listeners to hear about what some of those groups are and how we can work together to really kind of build up and empower ourselves. So Donna, I'll come to you, and I know that you're one of the founders of LoWEG. Can you please explain what this is, how it works, how people can join, and all the good stuff that I know you're doing in this area?
Yeah, sure. So LoWEG stands for the London Women in Engineering Group, and it is a cross-party subgroup of LoTag, which is the London Technical Advisory Group. And about 18 months ago, myself and 3 other women came together, and we were just discussing how there's quite a big hole. There isn't a space that women can go to. With my other hat on, I chair LoWEG, which is the London Highway Engineers Group, and that is predominantly male. There aren't really many women that attend that group. So LoWEG is very different because it's not just local authorities who are invited, it's utility companies, consultants, IT suppliers, people like Brightly. We've got Transport for London, the GLA, apprentices, and even just women who are interested in STEM and the highways industry who maybe have already left, but they're retired and they're still interested, or students and apprentices. And what we do is we offer what we like to say is a safe space. So our meetings are every other month, and we alternate between in person and online, so that we're kind of getting the maximum attendance that we can. We have 2 speakers, which are usually women in industry, talking about their career path, because we really believe in being that visible role model. So you can't be what you can't see. So we encourage our members to be speakers. Hannah's been a speaker before, because we want to hear the path that people have gone through and maybe the challenges that they've had to overcome to kind of inspire other people, give everyone that little boost that you can sort of change direction. If you're a highway engineer, could you go into like structures? Can you go into something else? And what we do at the end of every session is we have a thing called Safe to Speak Up. And we use Slido, so it's completely anonymous, and our members can post in the group any challenges they've got. So a recent one, it was, how can I deal with misogynistic behaviour and language? And then as a group, we brainstorm what we can do and we offer advice. And the fact that it is completely anonymous, I think that makes people really honest. We don't record any of the sessions, but I capture things so that after the meetings I can send out useful links. So I think at one meeting someone said that they were really struggling with their mental health. 2 of the chairs with myself are mental health first aiders, so we sent out some links straight away afterwards. If you can't get help in your organisation, go here. And I think that's just been a massive tool to our members. So we sent out the bat signal in October 2022, expecting no one to come to our first meeting. 89 women joined, which was just amazing. And we now have 327 women on our mailing list.
Wow, that's wonderful. Really strong network there. Hannah, I know you've spoken at that group. How have your experiences been?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic group. I've been to in-person events and the online ones, and hearing people's stories of hugely powerful. There was a session on the menopause, which I thought, just one woman really being vulnerable and going through her whole experience about what she'd been through and how she'd had really heavy periods all her life and having to deal with that on a highway site, and what do you do when you're, she was always like, I was the last person to climb the ladder, and all the sort of strategies that she was going to kind of like just be able to survive at work. But certainly that Safe to Speak Up session that's at the end, I feel has also been an area where people are just sort of being able to voice some of the concerns they have. I mean, I've been on one where someone said, I just don't think I can work in this industry anymore. And it's just, it felt like because it was anonymous, they were able to put it down on paper, what they were feeling. And at least having a network of people who are there sort of encouraging them and saying, look, we can help, is really powerful.
Yeah, I can really see that. And I've just written a few words down from when you were both speaking about this around survival, being able to voice things up, being able to be, vulnerable, that safety. I think these are all things that people are desperate for, whether that comes from your team at work, whether it comes through a network, whether it comes through friends or family, whatever it might be. I can really just see that that's some basic needs that people are really wanting. And certainly when some of these prejudices and we talk about intersectionality, where these things don't go out by themselves, you do need allies, you do need storytelling, you need people to say, this is my lived experience, actually what do you do? And often I find that when we share our lived experience, we realize we're not the only ones who've got that lived experience. I mean, there'll certainly be some things that are unique to us, but there'll be themes, and once we start sharing these stories, we actually say, well, that's not right, let's do something about this, or I've had the same, let's work together to kind of to help fix some of those examples. And you mentioned somebody not wanting to stay at their workplace. These are real economical things. We're talking about retention. We're talking about people wanting to stay in their businesses. So, I think networks have a real powerful place in keeping people in any sector.
Hello, I'm Sonia Byers, Chief Exec of Women in Transport, and you're listening to the Women in Transport podcast. I'm proud of the work we're doing together to create a safe space for different women working in transport to share their stories. You can find details on how to join the conversation in the episode show notes.
Anna, tell me about the group that you've started, the Flare group. I know it started just very recently. Tell me a bit about this, please.
Yeah, so as an organisation, so I've run the women's group at Brightly for 3 years now. Before that, when we were part of Pitney Bowes. So I had experience of running women's groups, and how we tend to run them is more like a lean-in circle, which is small, sort of 6 to 8 people who will meet regularly. And the idea of that is that you would be able to talk really openly and with one another. I think sometimes when there is a broader group, you get some very strong voices, and then some people don't get a chance to be able to speak up. So across Brightly, we've got multiple groups within the US because there's a much bigger user base there, but within the UK, we've got a group, and we'll take a topic at a time. So we recently covered like women's pain as well. We discussed like how that's quite often, like I think it's like it takes 3 times longer for women's pain to be identified rather than male pain. And that was a really powerful session. And I think people just wanted to have an outlet, exactly as you said, to be able to share their experience and to be able to talk about it. And I always feel, and I always say to people, like, protect the hour, because for your own mental health, like I always feel after that session, like full up. I feel like really kind of energized and positive, and kind of like I've got people who support me, who care about me. And so, I do think that sort of importance of having a network that you can talk to, and just it creates real positivity. And the other thing about the network or networking, and this is something that Women in Transport were talking about at our session we had recently, women network so much differently to men. Typically, women are seeking more of a bonding kind of relationship. You create very intimate, close networks, and where you support one another. And men typically are looking to who can they go and speak to, who can get them their next leg up, or have got advice, or they're looking for more senior people to go and network with. And from my experience of going to events where it's predominantly male, like the CHT dinner that's every sort of Christmas, we then, for the last 2 years, we've held a women's only table at that event. And I have been accused of tokenism around that as well. But the point for me for doing it was that I invited women that wouldn't necessarily have got the chance to go to an event like that because their bosses would have been there. And unfortunately, that's the sad state of affairs, is that it is a sea of men at that particular dinner. So I want to be able to give women a chance to attend that where they might not be able to go typically, and to be exposed to that same environment and network.
I love that. I know with Women in Transport, one of the things that we do at our networking events is to just do very active networking. And so Steve always gets up, who's our events lead, and he'll always get up and give guidance. And essentially the guidance is talk to people, and it's okay to say, okay, I'm going to go speak to somebody else now. And that's okay. What advice would you give to people who are looking to network and really kind of, lean into those opportunities? What would you tell people to do?
I think that is that having that courage. I think figure out the first thing to say, and like an intro piece. I like to say to people when I'm at those sort of events, "What have you got out of today?" Or that's my leading question, because it kind of puts it onto the other person to be able to come up with an answer and give me a chance to think of what to say. But if you have in your mind something like an opener, then you don't have to be sort of afraid to approach people and start a conversation, because that's half the battle, I think, sometimes. Just walking up and feeling like, oh, I'm speaking to someone I don't know, and what do I say? What I love as well about that session that Steve runs is that it's don't let your job title define you. So don't be afraid to talk about other things. And so you don't have to say, I'm Hannah, I'm the general manager, because actually, what does that mean to anybody? Why am I here? What am I trying to get out of it? What keeps you up at night? And those type of broad questions that will start out conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It means looking at each other as human beings, right? And not just I'm such and this is my job title. I think it's amazing to have allies and a network where people can just say, this is the game, this is some of the rules, and you can just play it like this and just be authentic, do what sounds right to you. But I think just knowing that there are some other ways of doing stuff and you can get something from it, I think that's really invaluable. Donna, I want to come to you. What have you learned from running the LoWEG network? And similarly, Hannah, I'll come to you as well. What things have you learned from being involved within transport, from kind of picking up this whole wider network piece? What have been some of the things that you've kind of taken as outcomes?
So, as a woman who's worked in the highways industry, for too many years, I've always been aware that sometimes I'm the only woman in the room, the only woman at a meeting. So when I started diving into this a bit more, and I was looking for some stats online from the Highways magazine, so women make up 47% of the UK workforce, but only 20% of the transport sector. That, that's so low, and that makes so much sense. Well, if I email someone, it's predominantly going to be a man who will reply and call me Kelly. No one ever reads my full name. And that's really sad, because one of the things that's come out of LoWEG is there's lots of women who are keen to work in the highways industry who may leave for a career break, for either childcare or other caring responsibilities, and they may not come back. So one of the aims of LoWEG is to try and retain the women that we've got in the highway sector, and obviously to encourage more. And we do that through outreach. But one thing that's become really clear through managing this group is how much it was needed. So as Hannah mentioned earlier on, some of the stuff that comes out, the Safe to Speak Up, it's worrying that there was nowhere for these people to go before. And so I'm so proud that we've created this space that women can come to every other month. And my email inbox is always open. People email me about all sorts of things, and I am not an expert at all. I have a lot of opinions and I'll offer advice if I can, but I will say I'm not the right person, but maybe this person is better suited. Do you mind if I link you in with them? And through LoWEG, but also through a really amazing group called STEMazing, I'm one of the inspirational women. So I've done some outreach in schools and going out into schools, mainly primary schools, targeting kids when they're like between 6 and 8, running some STEM activities, really trying to get the interest there to go into the STEM field, not necessarily like a civil engineering like I am, but just so that they're aware that there are these other careers out there. That's been hugely rewarding, and I don't think that I would have even thought to go into that sort of thing before LoWEG was formed.
Absolutely. So I know Alexandra, who runs STEMazing, so I'm totally going to drop her a note and tell her she got a mention on the podcast. And I know her journey as well, and it's about being that role model that maybe you didn't have, or at least passing on that energy to other people. And it sounds like you're creating a really strong network. And as you say, you're not the expert, but actually you're facilitating and you're enabling conversations. You're creating that safe space, and it's enough to be an expert in that engagement piece, to enable those conversations to take place, which they probably wouldn't have had you not thought about bringing those women together in that space. Hannah, I'll come to you now.
Yeah, so I created the FLAIR, which stands for Female Local Authority Roads Engagement, which is such a mouthful, which is why we just want to call it FLAIR. And it's for women who work in local authorities, and so it's more of a national piece. It's not competing with what Donna's doing at all, and we're very supportive of one another. But it was mainly to reach women in local authorities, because of the fact that there is so much press out there at the moment with there not being the investment in diversity and inclusion within local authorities, and the fact that it is quite like a waste of money. So we just wanted to be able to support women who work mainly in the highways sector, and just to echo what Donna said, that there just seems to be a need. The first meeting that we had, so not at the dizzy heights of LoWEG, but we had 50 people. And
that's still loads, though. Absolutely,
yeah. No, I'm really happy. And we're just starting out, so getting the message out there. And it's people just wanting to be able to share and have an outlet. And some of the things that we asked for feedback on, what do you want to cover? It is like career progression. How do I advance in this industry? And one of the stats that Steve shared from Running Transport with us is that your career progression is made up of 10% of what you do, your performance, 30% of your image, which I really struggle with actually, but 60% of exposure. So getting your face out there and being known to people so that you can be seen to be in kind of running for career progression. So those stats are really kind of really hard for a woman to listen to, I think. But yes, career progression, the health matters around sort of menopause, fertility. They also wanted to cover just examples of situational experience where they could be able to do things differently next time. And in our first meeting, we already kind of just tackled a few topics there that we kind of wanted to explore a bit further with the groups. So that's a monthly meeting. It's 1 hour. We provide a topic, first of all, just to sort of spark conversation. What's said in the group stays in the group. I split the group out into other rooms so that you can have those sort of smaller chats, and then we sort of regroup and discuss the topic afterwards. It's really a kind of a conversational space for people to reach out and to share experiences and strategies.
I attended the first Fulham meeting, and Hannah had set everyone homework to read the first chapter of Invisible Women, which I finished at 8:30 the night before. And the meeting was such a success by providing this space and everyone talking that actually we didn't get to the book because everyone was just so excited to have a space to go to. Because I think lots of the women that attended, I might be wrong, Hannah, because I know you did a poll, don't have a women's group in their organisation that they can go to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
it's scary, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think in just this, so I worked for this company for 16 years. We were acquired by various companies, of which one of them was called Dude, if you can believe it, Dude Solutions. They were quickly rebranded, and actually the CEO credited that to me, which I was really happy about.
Very good.
And they didn't have a women's group when I joined, so I was really worried. I was thinking, well, this company is called Dude, and there's no women's group. So that's when I started it, and we're now Brightly. But actually, the culture still was very good. It was very inclusive. We had parity on the leadership team. It was, it's just a legacy thing that it was called Dude. But it's so rare. I think it should be a rarity that you don't have like employee resource groups for people. But it still exists. It still goes on. So.
Yeah, you're right. It should be something that, in all networks, it should be something that exists already as part of your program and your policies. And I think you often find that it's somebody who really champions those agendas. And usually that championing comes from some form of experience. And you think, well, I don't want this to happen to somebody else. I'll create a group. And you think that's not necessarily the right way that it should happen. I mean, it's great there's passion in there, but what if it was just the norm, as you say? What if it was just the norm that there were these support networks within organizations? And it's great that people can join external organizations like Women in Transport. For me, the reason why I joined was because it was external, and also it opened me up to people who just from across the country that I wouldn't have had exposure to otherwise. I'd like to lean into your stat around the exposure piece. And you said something like 60%, something quite crazy, is based on like your network, your exposure, whose face you're in, all that kind of stuff. But there's so many layers of bias in there and prejudice, because I personally speaking, I'm a Muslim non-white woman. I'm a mother, and there's loads of reasons as to why I can't kind of put myself out there in some ways. Going, kind of after work drinks isn't something that I feel comfortable with. I don't put myself in those environments before. I used to at a certain point in my career, and then I realized I had a choice, and I hadn't really known that I had a choice. But it was a real ally, Jo Field, our president. I do a lot of work with her through her organisation, and she just asked me. She said, "Do you feel comfortable?" And I thought it was the first time in my career that someone's actually asked me, and I thought I don't. I'm sorry, I'd rather opt out. And so to have that opportunity is brilliant, but I wouldn't have thought if someone hadn't told me that you actually have a choice, Shireen. How bizarre does that sound? And then it kind of leaves you just in certain places. You've got your internal environment, but lots of us are working remotely now. A lot of us are working hybrid. So what does really the internal environment look like? And then it kind of leaves you to social media. And so again, not everyone feels comfortable to lean into those environments. So I feel like exposure is really subjective, and it's down to your own confidence, your own knowing what you can do, being comfortable in your own voice. There's all these things that kind of leave a lot to chance. So what advice would you give to people for making reaching out to networks or gaining that exposure that they might need for their careers? From either of you, I'd love to find out.
I think you can lean in internally, I think you probably would have to do that first, and I think make it known that you want to have you should have your own sort of development plan, and you really own your own sort of development, and make it known to others that actually this is where I want to go. This is what I want. I want more experience in X. And actually, what I will say to people is make it easy for people to say yes. So if you say, I would love to have more experience with dealing with clients, perhaps I can attend a couple of client meetings. So make it really kind of like a tangible thing that your manager or an adjacent manager can say, yeah, sure, of course you can come and do that. And we can, and you've got to find the way, but don't, you have to put the work in yourself in terms of coming up with the situations or the environment which will give you that exposure. To make it easy for people to just go, sure, of course, I can do that. That's within my power, and I can give you that opportunity. So I think, yes, make it known where you want to go. Sometimes you perhaps don't know, and that's okay as well, because you might say, actually, I want to explore this and see if I like it. So can I attend this meeting or do this course, or I want to learn more about this? But I think if you've got networks like the ones we've mentioned today, reach out to colleagues in other industries, or when you're at networking events, perfect opportunity to be able to ask someone, I'm interested in this, what's your advice, or what experience have you had? So yeah, really that kind of, unfortunately, I think even just the first thing, being aware that 60% of your career progression is based on exposure, is kind of like, okay, right, perhaps take on some of this and navigate this myself as well. So
yeah, that's huge. Absolutely. And really great tangible advice. Thank you. And Donna, with that, and also what other advice would you give to women in the sector?
Tell people to be courageous. And I know that is easier said than done. Don't be scared. So that's not quite the same thing as be courageous, because I used to hate being a public speaker. Absolutely hate it. And even getting ready for this, I said to Hannah, I was so nervous. But like Hannah said, find something that you can kind of make a compromise. So my manager put me forward to speak at a TFL event without asking me. I had panic attacks about it, but I found a Saturday public speaking class at the City bit. I said to him, well, if you pay for it, I'll give up my own time, because this is going to benefit us both. So it's having that little bit of a compromise. So yeah, if there's something that you want to study, let's say this amazing course, offer to do it in your own time if they're not willing to give you the time off work, because it's going to help you in the long run, because it's helping you to develop. You shouldn't have to, because it is part of your career development. You should be able to do that during working hours. But if you are met with a barrier, it's coming up with a solution. So I can't do that during hours. Okay, I'm willing to give up an afternoon a week to do it in my own time. So yeah, be an ally to all of those around you as well. So if you hear something that is unacceptable, or you see something that's unacceptable, call it out immediately. Like the story that I told earlier on, it hasn't served me any good for the colleague telling me what he heard. Whereas if I hear something that's inappropriate, I will be calling it out. There's no point me adding fuel to the fire and upsetting someone else, when actually it's on me to call it out when I see it. And joining a group, I can't tell you how much I rely on LoWEG, the fellow LoWEG members. It's been such a joy to be the chair and meet so many women. And when we have the in-person meetings and someone comes up and says, oh, I'm so and so, I'm like, oh, of course you are, of course, we've been emailing, have a big, now we're out of COVID, we can have a hug. And I feel like, all of these women, I know them quite well, because we've been corresponding by email and on LinkedIn for a while. But with the LinkedIn and the socials, I have noticed that I'm quite trying to be quite active, and there's always the odd sarcastic comment like, oh, you're always on LinkedIn, like, are you looking for another job? No, I'm trying to promote events that I'm helping, or I'm trying to promote something that maybe the WISE campaign are doing. Speaking of which, there is a PPE campaign at the moment being run by Katie Robinson. So if anyone wants to find out more, have a look for Katie Robinson on Instagram. But there will always be someone that has something negative to say. So it's just sort of like, I think, brushing it off and just having the courage to carry on, because what does it matter what they say?
Yeah, absolutely. Those comments are hilarious, aren't they? And I'm one of the co-facilitators with Ian Smith on the LEAD program, and we actively tell our participants, you have to lean into things like LinkedIn, and it might seem icky and it might feel like, oh, I don't want to do this, but actually, to Hannah's note around the 60% is based on exposure, you absolutely have to put yourself somewhere, and there's ways of doing it and be authentic and use your voice, but you do. And I actually view LinkedIn as an extension of your internal comms. The way the world is now, we are so hybrid, we are so online. Yes, there might be channels internally, like formal channels, but actually everyone's on LinkedIn. And so if you do something meaningful and mindfully, it doesn't have to come across as crass or kind of that ick factor, but it just comes across as something, doesn't it? Wonderful. Today's been really interesting, amazing. There's loads more to talk about on this topic, and we do have another podcast on PPE and lots of other things. So I just want to say thank you, Donna, thank you, Hannah. And if our listeners, if you want to tell us about how you would call things out, how you would call things in, any advice that you give to other women and allies in general within the sector, please do let us know. But with that, I'd like to thank you all and join us for the next episode.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.